This week, it was our introductory week, and we had a chance to start talking about kind of what our organizations, what's maybe different about working organization. And our particular focus is understanding the nature of managerial work. What is it? What are the jobs that are done, and what are these jobs like? And in talking about the nature of managerial work, the really first thing that we did was we looked at Mintzberg's research on what managers do, and in particular, looked at what are the real behaviors here. And we framed this in terms of what we're going to be doing throughout the course, this notion of a behavioral analysis, where behavioral analysis doesn't start with what the should question, that would be normative. We really start with and say, what are the actual behaviors? And we try to understand why those behaviors. It is much more productive way of certainly of understanding work behavior is what's the why of people things are doing rather than jumping to conclusions about morality or attitude. And the same thing for understanding what managers do. We start with and say they're doing sensible things. They're doing things that cope with their situation. And coming from that, I think, gives us a new perspective on the challenge of leadership, the challenge of what it is that people have to do to be effective leaders. And based on this research, we saw that first, the kind of core activity that managers are engaged with and that basically dominate their time is they spend a lot of time dealing with people problems, but just as important, and it's going to be important for us as we understand being how to be an effective leader, is an awful lot of your success in the organization is how well you work with peers and superiors. And especially when you get involved with influencing organizational decision making, that is really leadership exercise with your peers, influencing superiors and participating with them. Another kind of important notion that we raise, which is the leadership notion, is that operational problems often require social system solutions. So to say that we have a productivity problem, for instance, that's not the solution to the problem. That may involve certainly equipment. It may not involve people, but almost always if it involves equipment, it involves training and implementation processes that do involve people. So the really core of management, the complexity of it, the challenge of it, and the rewards of it are handling people problems, and very often business problems, the solution involves people sets of issues. We emphasize this again in saying that, you know, change processes in organizations are complicated typically because they involve people, and people have to do things perhaps differently than they've done them. They may resist this, and understanding that is a big part of being effectiveness. For our purposes and throughout the course, we're to really highlight for you this notion and separate for you, I hope, make clear management is the role, it's the position you occupy. Leadership is the conduct in that position. We have a tendency in how we, kind of talk about systems to talk about people are in a leadership role. Well, really what we mean is they're in a high level position within the company. And we want to separate out that notion of the role, the power, the authority that goes with the position and how they conduct themselves. And for us, how individuals conduct themselves is what the leadership is. It's not by definition a position that you occupy. I think we'll find this very productive for the course. We talked a little bit about, is leadership a natural ability? We actually believe that it's something that everybody can learn how to do. It's not necessarily easy to learn how to do, but feasible to learn how to do. And so we're committed to making that happen for you in the course. And also a recognition that we've had, and we've developed it, we'll develop it more in the second week, is that authority comes with the position, But how do you effectively use authority for us is where, that's the leadership component. And people who are, we've had this in our own experience, people who are new to management positions, they have a tendency to maybe crank on that authority lever really hard, and you've seen it yourself. They're ineffective. They're trying to boss people around, and that's really not the most effective. It's not a leadership quality, and we'll understand this in greater detail as we move through the course. Real pivotal for us in this first week with the work of Henry Mintzberg. You read a Harvard Business Review article he wrote about his work. The Nature of Managerial Work is a book that he wrote based on his research. It has a great deal more detail. And if you really get interested in kind of drilling in and just reading more of that, this is the book. It's not a super long book, but about 150 page a book. Mintzberg himself is a very prolific author. Became very well known later in his career for his writing on business strategy. And this kind of early work that he did on the reality of how managers work greatly informed everything he did subsequently. And he's somebody in the strategy side who believes that strategy is kind of a waste of time, and argues that strategy in organizations is not a plan, it's something emergent, it's a set of capabilities that are realized. So it's a real interesting, different direction of argument. And so that's something worth reading longer term. So for our first week, I hope that you have, been stimulated to really start think about, okay, what is leadership? How do I separate it out from the position that people occupy? Because we have certainly seen people who are in roles, and we wouldn't call them good leaders. And we're going to see this as we move into the second week and we get into case studies, how the conduct of a person actually is value destroying. And from looking at leadership as conduct, we have to come to terms with the fact that some people get in management roles and actually damage the profitability, productivity of the workplace. So it's quite possible that the way people conduct themselves can be a negative. It's not always uniformly positive, and I think that helps us have a more productive conversation about leadership. So this is a first week summary. We've just really been introduced to set of topics that we're going to elaborate on throughout the course. And I hope again that you've come to appreciate this notion of a behavioral approach, but also starting to sort out and think about this notion of this that the course really is called managing and leading for in a very purposeful way. They're not the same thing, and we want to start to understand the differences and really how leadership is an opportunity to add value above and beyond what the position demands of you.